that Tyson Fury is back at number 1, and the Deontay Wilder rematch is set to be for the Ring Magazine title. The Ring Magazine panel have, like WBN before them, moved to elevate Tyson Fury to the number 1 position in the heavyweight rankings. Following Anthony Joshua's demise, Ring Magazine experts decided, also like WBN, to drop the fallen champion to number 4. In a further move, Andy Ruiz gate crashes the division at number 3, the same position handed to the new title holder by WBN on Monday. And what this essentially means is that now, since Tyson Fury is ranked at number 1 and Deontay Wilder is ranked at number 2, if and when their rematch takes place, provided that they can hold on to those positions in the rankings, both guys make it out of their next fights, on top. If and when their rematch takes place, it will qualify for what is the Ring Magazine title. There's just one problem with that. Actually, a few problems. For starters, Tyson Fury isn't actually ranked as the consensus number 1 heavyweight in the division. Where Ring Magazine may have elevated him to the number 1 spot, both BoxRec and Transnational have Andy Ruiz seated at number 1. A look over at ESPN's current rank standings differs from either Ring Magazine's, BoxRec's, or Transnational's, because they've currently got Deontay Wilder seated at number 1. So at this point in the juncture, there is no consensus number 1 heavyweight, but if we go by the majority, 2 out of 4 of these powers that be have got Andy Ruiz seated at number 1, whereas Ring Magazine has Tyson Fury there, but ESPN has Deontay Wilder there.
Why?
To top it all off, the chronological order that these fights are supposed to take place in, there's a lot to be addressed there, because while, at least right now, Tyson Fury's rematch with Wilder, at this point in time, it does qualify for the Ring Magazine title. They've got to hold on to those positions in their rematch in order for it to qualify. And it just so happens that Wilder and Fury aren't the guys that are fighting next. As far as we know, Deontay Wilder's going to be squaring off against Luis Ortiz in his next fight before the year is out.
In a rematch.
So you hypothesize that if Wilder, he has the fight with Luis Ortiz, he wins the fight.
In a rematch.
The Joshua versus Ruiz rematch is also taking place before the end of the year, sometime in either November or December, before the year is out. That rematch will likely take place before Wilder's rematch with Fury. So what's that gonna do to the rank standings? What effect will that have if Anthony Joshua wins his titles back, or if Andy Ruiz beats him in the same or better fashion in a second fight? What effect would that have on the rank standings? Essentially, what I'm getting at is this news is a bit premature. That while they may have chosen to elevate Tyson Fury over there at Ring Magazine, because it's not unanimous, but if the people at Ring Magazine have decided to elevate him to the number 1 spot
right now,
that doesn't necessarily mean that the pecking order will still be the same at the end of the year. Essentially, it's a question of, if Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz's rematch ends up taking place before the Wilder versus Fury rematch, if one fight comes before the other, which in all likelihood it will, because, Shelly Finkel, Deontay Wilder, they let everybody know the order, the chronological order that these fights are supposed to be happening in. And if Andy Ruiz versus Joshua, part 2, happens before Wilder versus Fury 2, what effect is that going to have on the rank standings? And will Wilder versus Fury 2 still qualify for the Ring Magazine title? What if Anthony Joshua goes in there and blasts Andy Ruiz out of there the way he was supposed to in the first fight? Or what if Andy Ruiz shows lightning struck twice and he beats the hell out of Anthony Joshua in his own backyard yet again? You understand? All these different outcomes may have an effect on the rank standings. So while they may have elevated Tyson Fury to the number 1 spot right now, we don't know with any certainty that by the time he fights Wilder again, everybody's going to still be in the same position. We don't know that. So the real news here is that Ring Magazine has chosen to elevate Tyson Fury to number 1. But we don't yet know if his rematch with Wilder will qualify for the Ring Magazine title. We just don't know that.
Anything could happen.
Now, as far as where they've chosen to rank Tyson Fury, that boils down to preference, ladies and gentlemen. That boils down to opinion. It's up to you whether or not you think he should be there. It's up to you. What we know with an absolute certitude is all four of these different organizations ranked Anthony Joshua as the consensus number one, and Andy Ruiz just beat him. Some people may say that in beating him, well, he's the natural to be number one because he just beat the number one guy. While some people might say that, they never had Anthony Joshua at number one themselves, and they've always thought of Tyson Fury as being that guy. Similar logic for Wilder. It all depends on how you feel about it. But what we know with an absolute certitude is all these different organizations had the same guy ranked at number one before Saturday night's fight. So do you think it makes sense for Ring Magazine to elevate Fury to the number one spot when you didn't beat the number one guy? Andy Ruiz did. It all depends on how you look at it, ladies and gentlemen. I'll leave that up to you. But what we know today is that Anthony Joshua losing this fight has blown the division wide open. Okay, now there is no consensus number one guy at heavyweight, and it's split between three different guys. The heavyweight division and the crown for it is still a three-headed monster. It's just a different head this time. Now, it's Andy Ruiz's head, where two of the four powers that be have Andy seated at number one. Ring Magazine has Tyson Fury there, and ESPN has Deontay Wilder there. So there's no consensus number one. There's not one guy that if you check across the board is seated at number one. So it's subject to contention. It is now subject to debate. And at this point in the juncture, it's going to be up to Anthony Joshua to work his way back into his old position over the next 6 months to reestablish himself and the pecking order. Moving on. In a rather strange turn of events, get this. Breidis versus Glowacki stakes raised with vacant WBC title at stake.
What?
And, I touched on the recent events in the cruiserweight division in about 2 or so videos earlier this week, and how what I was expecting was for Junior Dorticos' fight with Andrew Tabiti to be elevated to a title fight. It being that both Junior and Andrew, they're ranked at number 2 and number 3. And the only guy ranked ahead of them is moving up to heavyweight. So what I was expecting was that the WBC would elevate their upcoming fight in the World Boxing Super Series to a title fight. Yet for some strange reason, they've decided to put that vacant title on the line in Breidis and Glowacki's fight. Those two guys are not the number 1, the number 2, or the number 3 in the WBC's rankings, yet they're getting to fight for that title before Andrew and Junior. And I thought to myself, as I read this article, what could be the reason? What could be motivating this move? And in all my wisdom, I told myself, follow the money. It's not a coincidence that these fights are taking place in Riga, Latvia, Breidis' backyard. That's not a coincidence. And it's not a coincidence that they are affording him an opportunity at the green belt first, instead of Andrew and Junior. And I know that in one way or another, one shape or form, Andrew or Junior, they're going to get their shot at that title eventually, because the winner of their fight is going to advance in the tournament. So one way or another, they're going to get a shot at it. But it still doesn't make any sense that, if anything, their fight ahead of Breidis' fight with Glowacki should be the fight for the green belt. Breidis and Glowacki already have the WBO title to fight for, because you may or may not be aware of this, but apparently the WBO has already elevated Glowacki to WBO champion before and without a contest. As soon as the title went vacant, they handed it over right to him. And the reason I think they decided to do that is, once again, sanctioning fees. They want to put that title in someone's hands as fast as possible so that they can get those sanctioning fees. And what I gather is the WBC might have been of a similar mindset. They figure that they can get bigger sanctioning fees for Breidis and Glowacki's fight than they can for Andrew and Junior's fight. That's what I figure. Because look at where the fight is taking place. It's taking place in Latvia. Do you think Junior and Andrew have a whole bunch of fans in Latvia? Fuck no. If those guys are showing up to come see anybody and support anybody, it's Mairis Breidis. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to put that title on the line in his fight to add to the luster, to add to the prestige, and thereby collect bigger sanctioning fees as a result of what the fight generates. That's what I figure. That's what I think is going on. And I reiterate, you don't have to lose much sleep over this, because one way or another, the winner of Dorticos versus Tabiti is going to get a shot at that title, one way or another. Whichever one of them advances to the next phase, the final of the World Boxing Super Series, they're going to get their crack at that title, one way or another. But it's just the way that the WBC has chosen to handle this situation, that further denotes how tactless and tacky they can be, that they really don't respect or abide by their own rank standings, because you're putting a world title opportunity in the hands of two guys that aren't even ranked in the top 3. Well, why the fuck would you do that? We all know why you would do that. Sanctioning fees. Follow the money, ladies and gentlemen. Follow it, and you will understand the strange moves and decisions of the WBC. Because look, I understand it, I get it, it's a tournament, right? And one way or another, the winner of Tabiti versus Dorticos is going to get a shot at both of those titles. One way or another, they are. So it's not the worst thing in the world. But at the end of the day, yeah, it is kind of tacky. It does kind of taint things a bit. The fact that you've crowned Glowacki a champion without a contest, and the fact that you're putting the green belt on the line in their fight when those guys aren't the ones at the top of your ranks, the other two guys are. So what gives, you know? That's all I'm saying, that these sanctioning bodies, in their greed, are in such a hurry to put their titles in the hands of two other guys that they're kind of sapping the competitive and sporting element of what it really means to become a champion. If the title's vacant and nobody's holding it, you don't have to be in a hurry to crown a new champion. Let both these guys fight for that status before you go crowning one of them a champion and another one a contender. That's all I'm saying. One way or another, the best man is going to win, and that's why the tournament format is still a great format. Because one way or another, the fact that this is a tournament and it's got phases, it's got, finals and semifinals and so on. The fact it's a tournament means the best are still going to fight the best. One fucking way or another. Politics of boxing or no politics of boxing. These guys are going to, however you got that title, you're going to have to end up defending it against the best available competition because you're in a tournament. So, one way or another,
they'll get their shot.
The winner of Dorticos Tabiti is going to get the shot that they deserve. But it's just going about it this way that kind of taints things. But still, one way or another, the best man will win. Because whether Glowacki's a champion now or he's a champion at the end of the semifinal, at the end of the day, if you deserve it or not, you're going to have to prove that you deserve it once the final rolls around. Whoever emerges on top, whether it's Breidis or Glowacki, whoever wins,
whichever one of them,
whoever makes it into the final, you're going to have to show that you actually deserve to hold those belts, no matter how you got them. And finally, it appears that two-division champion Jose Pedraza is planning on making a move to 140 pounds to attempt to become a 3-division champion. And in the article, he talked about how, they stayed at 130 for a while. They might have overstayed their welcome there, and they don't want to repeat that here at 135 pounds. So what they plan to do is move up. And, fighters moving up in weight, it's a crapshoot, man. It can all look a certain way. You can think that a guy is a shoo-in to make a splash and win a fight, and then something like what happened to Jorge Linares could happen to you. You end up losing to a journeyman with several losses, something like 7 losses in the very first round. That once the opening bell rings, it can become immediately apparent that you don't belong there, that you may have just climbed too high. And a similar fate could await Jose Pedraza somewhere down the line. Look, you move up. You go up there, you move up. You have a tune-up fight, a warm-up fight, so that you can acclimate to the weight. And you might actually make it through that fight. But as you approach that upper echelon, that's where your mettle is really going to be tested. And we see what the 140-pound division, who the 140-pound division is comprised of. That place is a fucking war zone, man. That's what it is. You got punchers through and through in that entire weight class. Maurice Hooker is a puncher. Jose Ramirez is a puncher. Josh Taylor is a puncher and a mover. And Regis Prograis, this guy packs a fucking wallop. That if you were going to try to win a world title from any of these guys, you'd have to end up going to hell and back, going through hell and back to do it. Because none of these guys are just going to lay down and hand it to you. Those are the facts. For a guy like Jose Pedraza, who, he's not a bad fighter. I mean, I don't even want to count him out. He is a good fighter. He has shown that. He showed that. He showed that at 130, and he showed that at 135 to a lesser extent. But at the end of the day, if we're just going to be honest with each other, if we're going to be honest about what we're looking at, Jose Pedraza better take his time, navigate carefully, and really think about just when he wants to shoot for a title shot. Because if he's talking about, shooting for a title shot in 1 or 2 or even 3 fights, it could be disastrous for him. I reiterate that 140 is a fucking war zone. The perils of moving up in weight, they're not always immediately visible to the fans that discuss, what this really means and what threat it poses to the fighter, regardless of what he displayed in his previously prescribed weight class. They'll say things like, well, the guy rehydrates to X, Y, and Z, right? And they figure that because that's what the guy rehydrates to, that he should be a shoo-in at the very next weight. But upon moving up there, what these guys aren't realizing is those guys that are already there, already campaigning there, they may rehydrate to the same as or greater than weights than the guy moving up. So he still is, in essence, taking on naturally bigger fighters, any way you slice it. And I'm not sold that a Jose Pedraza can work his way through a title shot given the 4 world titleists that are already there. Hell, look, I'm not sure that Jose Pedraza can hold his own against an Ivan Baranchyk, much less a fucking Josh Taylor or a Regis Prograis or a fucking Maurice Hooker or a goddamn Jose Ramirez. The point that I'm making is Jose Pedraza, he can move up. Let him move up. Let him take his time. Acclimate to the weight. Let the division sort itself out. And then when he's ready, he shoots for a title. Because if he plans on doing this anywhere between 2 to 3 fights, his fucking ass is grass.